Welcome to Love and Trauma, the real deal. I'm Danielle Sebastian, best-selling author, coach, and yes, I've been through the marriage trenches myself. This show is all about how to actually deal with trauma in relationships and make it work without losing your mind. If you're ready for honest talk, no fluff, and tools that cut through the noise, tune in, because let's face it, love can be a bit of a mess, but it's a mess worth figuring out. This is Love and Trauma, the real deal.
What if the very things you were taught to be proud of, being the strong one, the fixer, the peacekeeper, are actually the same things keeping you stuck in unhealthy relationship patterns? Today's episode is personal. This is a deep, honest conversation between two women, Isla and me, who both found ourselves in codependent relationships. We were over-functioning, over-helping, and taking responsibility for everyone else's healing. And we were exhausted. We had tried everything to fix the people we loved and only later realized that it wasn't all their fault. And it definitely wasn't all ours either. But what we didn't know back then is that healing our relationships had to start with healing how we were wired to survive. And that's what this episode is all about. I'm so honored to welcome Isla Fleming. She's not just a licensed therapist with over 14 years of experience, but she has deep roots in Bowen family systems theory. And we're going to get into just a little bit about what that means. She's also a survivor of family addiction and generational trauma. She was raised in a home shaped by chaos, anxiety, and zero boundaries. And she spent years battling chronic pain, depression, and panic, trying to manage what could never be hers to carry. Now, Isla helps women untangle from these same trauma loops so they can finally stop abandoning themselves, stop trying to fix everyone else, and start creating relationships that feel safe, mutual, and actually healthy. And the best part, she's going to walk us through 5 practical steps you can start using today to change the dynamic, even if the people around you never do the work. So if you've ever thought, I've lost myself in this relationship, I've tried everything and nothing works, I want peace, but I don't want to give up on the people I love, then please stay until the end, because this conversation might just change everything. Let's get right into it. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for being on this show. How are you today?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm great.
Well, tell me just a little bit about your past and what led you to be doing what you're doing now.
Yes. So, I personally am an adult child of an alcoholic, and I found myself in adulthood getting into relationships and repeating some of the same dynamics of over functioning and codependency. Finding myself being the fixer, trying to fill in the gaps, or with partners who struggled with substance use or mental illness themselves. So that's kind of that's kind of my story of why this became my niche, because it's something that I did so much work on myself. And I definitely noticed with my therapy clients that a lot of people were coming into therapy and were struggling with having those healthy boundaries with their partners or even with their friends or at work. So it was definitely like, I don't want people to have to go through as much research and podcasts and probably, to be honest, making their career a therapist to try to figure out like what was healthy and normal.
So you've talked about how trauma, especially in families with addiction, creates a blueprint for what feels normal. How does the early environment shape the kind of relationships we're drawn to later on?
Oh, that's such a great question. And there's so much to it. So I primarily work with a theory called Bowen family systems theory. So the idea is that the more traumatic situations that a family goes through, the greater likelihood that something called codependency or fusion will come up. So Bowen calls it fusion. And in the common, vernacular and in addiction medicine, they call it codependency. And it was typically said that the wife develops codependency, which is like a fixing kind of addiction to the husband who's drinking. Obviously, doesn't always show up the wife and husband. There's a lot of different ways it can show up. But so in a family where there is a lot of trauma and chaos, and there's something being managed, whether someone has an addiction or a severe illness or mental health diagnosis, it could be a parent or a child. Everyone's trying to manage anxiety in the system so that the relationships don't end or fall apart. So the idea is that in a healthy family system or in a family system where there's not a lot of anxiety or like a traumatic situation that comes up, everyone in the family kind of does their part. If there's four family members, mom takes on 25% of the anxiety, dad takes on 25% and manages it, and then the two kids take on 25 and 25. But in a family system where there is some kind of trauma, what tends to happen is there's a lot of different things. One is called triangulation, which means that maybe dad is over relying on a substance and then mom starts to overfunction. Or maybe one of the kids is kind of seen as the golden child. So they're taking on a lot of the anxiety because they're overfunctioning to kind of be a distraction. Sometimes there's the joker, the kid that is trying to make everyone laugh. Or there could be, the lost child, the kid that is kind of like ignored and goes off to figure out things on their own and is kind of not given as much attention to. So, what happens is we recreate these patterns in adulthood because it's what we know, it's what feels like home, it's what feels comfortable. And then we get stuck. And so, what unfortunately happens with a lot of people is and this is not a this is not like a fun thing to think about, but we come and say, my family is driving me crazy, my friends are driving me crazy, my job is asking too much. But my job as a therapist is to help them to control what they're able to, which is themselves, and which is to look at these patterns and think about them and how they showed up in your family and possibly even generationally, and to say, am I repeating these dynamics because they feel comfortable? And what would it look like if I did things a little bit differently? And it's going to disrupt the system. And your family's probably not going to like it and you're going to feel awful. But that's where the growth comes in sometimes. So it's baby steps. We don't push anyone into this, but it's a series of questions that we ask.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is that those coping mechanisms worked for you. They worked for you at that point. And so it makes it even harder after what? I mean, 30 years usually do people
Absolutely.
realize that there's a different way. It is harder to change it when something served you.
There are different tenets of Bowen family systems theory where we kind of zoom out and we look at the big picture and we say, these dynamics tend to happen in most families. How do you think that they showed up in yours? And if we can say that, we can kind of depersonalize it a little bit and take the emotion out of it, make it a little bit objective. And it creates the space for us to start to think, maybe I could react differently, you know. And so it's not about shame and it's not about, pushing ourselves super, super hard. It's just about asking some gentle questions.
I'm interested because codependency, I don't know. I think people are confused by that term or see it in a really negative light. And so we don't talk about it as much as we should. What is your definition of, what have you identified as being codependency for you and for, the people you serve?
So I think people typically come to me when they're feeling anxious, depressed, and stressed. And they're usually thinking, what do I need from the other person in my life? Do I need to cut off a family member? Do I need to get my partner to agree to couples counseling? And um, I think it's very uncomfortable to focus on ourselves because I think for so long with codependency, what happens is we're focusing on the other person. What do all these people need to change? And once they change, I'm going to be okay. I mean, if that were possible, if we weren't human beings, maybe that would be just fine. But we can't control other people. And I think with codependency, we probably got some traction. It probably worked for a little while. Like my parent, maybe didn't drink so much, or maybe sometimes they listened to me when I spoke to them in a certain way, or when I screamed. But maybe the anxiety went away when I did some like anxious habits, or I asked my partner over and over again to give me validation, and it worked. But it works until it doesn't. When
And
we
you're
have
burned out.
oh, so
You
tired and
burn
burnt out.
out, exhausting doing that.
Right.
So I kind of like, do you like this term? So you're abandoning yourself to stay connected?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think most of the time we're like, I will do whatever it takes to make this relationship work. If you're the overfunctioner, you think, I'm a good person. I can make this work. This is my identity. And, you know, this person's going to fit in my puzzle whether they want to or not. I'm going to force them into it. And, um, to be honest, it's not the most respectful thing to do to a loved one. And it really keeps people from growing. If we think about it the other way, like if someone was forcing us to do something, we wouldn't want to do it. We would actually probably start acting less mature. We would maybe act rebellious. And I think that's a lot of the times what happens. Or maybe the person just says, like, I don't want to have anything to do with you, or they shut down, or they get deeper into denial or shame, or, feel that even we're abusing them. So yeah, it's kind of can turn into a toxic dynamic.
I, have been married to someone with a trauma history, and we struggled significantly with all of the things, including me taking on some codependency roles in my relationship. And it felt like to me at the time that it was very out of my control to do anything. Like you said. So that's how I interpret it. Like this is out of my control. Unless he does this, we're not going to get anywhere. Unless this happens, we're not going to get anywhere. But it was at this one point when I realized I had more control over what was going on than I thought.
Mhm.
So let's talk just a little about that. You teased it earlier on about what some of those steps could be that you could start taking today.
So the first one that's a practical skill is just emotion regulation. So I know that's like a, sciencey term. So what I mean by that is basically just pause before you react. So oftentimes when we're talking to our partner, we're about to have a blow up, and it might be like he said, she said, and is it his fault? Is it, and he's like, it's your fault. Um, just to take a breath, because when we're thinking of, in our emotional mind, we could be all over the place. We could say things that we regret, we could hurt feelings. If we know that we did our part and then our partner goes off and drinks again, we can kind of have that rational reassurance that like we did our part, we did what we could. Um, so just take some deep breaths. You don't have to fix everything right away. We don't want this to turn into like, you know, gaslighting or rolling our eyes or stonewalling or punishment, whatever you want to call it. That isn't what this is. This is really taking responsibility for ourselves in the relationship. And we may honestly feel like this is not my responsibility. My partner is off the wall, and, your feelings are valid. And at the same time, if a part of you wants to keep on doing, trying in this relationship, you're still there. what's it going to hurt? This is a skill you need to learn whether you stay with them or not.
Can I add a little bit to that? The
Please.
pause is so huge. And if you are dealing with a partner who has a trauma history, which in a lot of addiction, I think has to do with some of that, but trauma history, there is no rationalization that can occur when
Mhm.
somebody's being triggered.
Mhm.
And so I would suggest more than just a breath, to be honest, that no rationalization can happen until both parties are completely calmed down. And so my suggestion for someone who is experiencing a lot of triggers in the relationship, and it can go both ways if you're constantly walking on eggshells, to do more than just take a breath, take a couple days and really let things calm down. Because a lot of us who are married to somebody with a trauma history, we know that the trigger does not end in 30 minutes or an hour.
Mhm.
Like the data, a lot of the communication advice is to take it 30 minutes and come back to it. In the case of these high emotions and triggers, I don't think there should be a time limit on when the repeat conversation should occur.
Mm. Mhm. I I love that. And also, it makes me think about, I have had some relationships like that, and I do I would say I have more of an anxious attachment. So the idea of waiting a couple days, makes me go a little bit.
Yes,
And at the same
100%. A lot of
time,
it has to
yeah,
do with us. Like,
yeah,
again, looking at yourself, right? If you have an attachment, like you
yeah,
just said, which a lot, if you have codependency, we may, right?
yeah. Oh,
Then
yeah.
you want to resolve it quickly,
Yes.
right? And so you push it. And
Oh,
then when the partner isn't ready, guess what? You're creating less safety between you when both of you aren't ready. So, yeah, I mean, that's a hard thing to do, to wait 2 days. I mean, a lot of my clients are like, what are you talking about? I don't want this to drag on. They drag on for 2 days anyway, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
if you try to address it when somebody is not ready, then actually, I think worse things get said
Oh
and
my
done
God.
in the heat,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Ideally, I would, being someone with with tendency toward that, I need to be stretched. I need to practice. I need to learn more emotion
Yes.
regulation skills. And also, if this is kind of what we're working with, if there's somebody who maybe has a more avoidant attachment or who has, is highly triggered, CPTSD, or, whatever the case may be, I think that when we're both regulated, coming back and saying, like, what can we do to support each other in that moment? Or, like, what can we make a plan for in that moment? Is there like a phrase we can say, or something like that? Is there can we put like a note on the refrigerator that says, like, I love you even though I'm mad at you? And I can go and look at that. Is there something that we can do? I think because when we start making more accommodations, like if it doesn't sit right with us, then that's also over functioning. So
Yep,
I think,
indeed.
yeah, it's got to
And you
be like a
kind of hit on
balance.
the avoidant part too. So not just attachment where we want to talk about it, right? Do we need where we want to resolve it right away? Then the avoidant will never come back to it, right?
Yes,
And
like
so
I feel better.
that's
Everything's good. Yeah.
yeah, that's the issue for the avoidant for taking a long break. And so that if you're more of the avoidant and then you let things kind of, be put under the rug, then that's your challenge, right?
Yes.
Is to then
Yes.
when take that break, but you really do need to come back to it
Yeah,
at
and
some
it's
point.
scary,
It's
you know.
scary. Yes.
But it's, I don't know, sometimes people hold hands while they're having that conversation, whatever you need to do to kind of like have a regulated moment together.
The bottom line is if it's then the conversation will go much better once everybody's regulated, right? That's the
Absolutely.
important piece. And I also recommend like walks. There's something about being on a walk
Yeah.
that puts you both on a level playing field. And other things you can try, I think, I don't know what you thought, but sometimes especially for a trauma survivor, they will feel in trouble if you say, hey, let's sit down and talk and look each
Oh my
other in the
God.
eye. I
Yeah.
wouldn't recommend that for the follow-up conversation unless a lot of work has been done, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I do like things like you're doing something else, you're doing the dishes, or if you can go for a walk, so that it just seems like nobody's in trouble. And this can be the point is to have a really good discussion about how to make things better.
Totally. And I think a lot of times as, as someone who struggles with codependency, I can be like, "Oh, they gave a little bit, so that's good enough. Okay, just Ayla, like that's enough. Don't ask for any more." But I think, when we fall into that, versus coming to the conversation and continuously being like, oh, it doesn't feel exactly right. Maybe they say they want to wait a week and I want to wait an hour. So we talk about it more to figure out like what is going to be possible for both of us. And it might take a lot longer than you think. This could be something that you have to come back to, a couple times for 5 minutes at a time for a month.
Yes. And it's okay.
Like
It's
it's totally
okay.
fine.
Because if you're an avoidant or if you have an attachment or you have trauma, you often need to think about it,
Yeah,
right? And that's okay. So it's about, talking about what the issue is at hand and being like, okay, I need to think about it because that's a really good point. How could we do this different next time? And come back to it. Yeah, it can be a month-long process, and that's okay as long as you're creating safety and you feel like things are moving forward.
absolutely.
I
Both of you
agree.
matter. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for
So,
going there with me. Okay, so now,
yeah.
sorry, that was
Yes.
just step 1, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm trying to hurry.
No,
Okay.
not sorry. I jumped in there because I think that is so important. The
Absolutely.
pause to
And
address other ways of doing it based on your particular situation that work for you. Don't worry about what works for everybody else.
right,
Worry
right,
about what works for you in your relationship. Okay,
right.
next.
Totally.
Next.
Totally. And the running you said, I know I'm going to get off track again, but
Yeah,
like
okay.
running or walking, whatever, incorporating
Yep.
your body. So I have studied EMDR. I'm EMDR
Yes.
trained, and
Tell
they
me.
think, yeah,
Yes.
there's something with the connections in your brain when you're using both sides of your body or when you're moving. It's helping you update information more easily. It's helping you regulate your emotions. It's keeping you more in the prefrontal cortex of your brain, which is the thinking brain, taking you out of your lizard brain. I don't know all the science terms, but I do know that there's a lot of science that supports that. So
I just see it. I see it so much in my relationship. It really works. Let me just put it
yeah,
that way. There's science behind it and it really works
absolutely.
in your
Absolutely.
relationship day to day. So give it a try.
Give it a whirl, people.
Give
All
it a
right.
try.
So the second one is, and I think we talked about this a little bit, self-differentiation. So say what's true.
Banging your head against the wall trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship impacted by childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be this daunting. When you're married to a partner with unresolved childhood trauma, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells, never quite knowing what will set them off. No matter what you try, it feels like there's always something triggering another emotional response that seems completely out of context. And the harder you try to fix it, the more discouraged you feel. So what's the issue here? Navigating marriage with a trauma survivor is different. The love languages don't work. Date nights don't work. Self-help books don't help. But here's the good news. I've created something that does work. Something built from years of hard-earned lessons and real-life experience. Ready to take the first step toward real change? Let's talk. I'm offering a free one-on-one call where we'll dive into what's going on in your relationship and figure out a way forward together. This isn't just another quick chat. It's a chance to finally be heard, to share what you're going through with someone who truly gets it. No judgment, just real support. So if you're ready to start making sense of it all and find a little more peace in your marriage, book your free call now. Your happiness, your peace, and your relationship are worth it. Let's do it together.
So
Yes.
you may feel that want to like overfunction or underfunction or sweep it under the rug. But if you're regulating your emotions, yeah, you might be the squeaky wheel. You might be the black sheep in your family. They might be like, oh, you're being dramatic or being annoying, but you're you. So there's a benefit in being you. And if you want to show up as your authentic self in the relationship, you definitely have something to contribute. As long as you're regulating those emotions, you need to be yourself in order to not really like, it's good for you, but also not rob your partner of getting the benefits of who you are and the different perspective. So the point isn't let me figure out what to say to get the outcome that I want. The point is to probably be a little uncomfortable if you're codependent and think about what you need, and to say, I really need you to do this. Let's talk about this. Maybe it'll be possible,
I
maybe not.
agree with you on this. I did it. I am totally in this boat, but I feel like when you're codependent, you don't really come out with what you need
Mhm.
clearly,
Mhm.
and therefore it creates more ambiguity, and your partner is confused with, and even though you feel like you're being clear, but we're really not. And so I love that, just come out and say what you need. Like if you are if you're talking about the schedule for the week
Mhm.
and you want to take your kid to practice because you like that time with your 11-year-old son,
Mm.
it's okay to talk about the schedule and say, I want to do this. I'm going to do this because I love that part. What I could really use help with is this, this, and this. And then you have a conversation about it. It's
Right.
totally okay to ask for or do those things that you want. Not everything has to be a negotiation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think as time goes by, we realize that some of these conversations we were so afraid to have, like
Yes.
we both gain resilience and we can have
Yep.
them. It's fine.
Exactly. Love
Yeah.
it.
Number three is tracking your own patterns. So this could be about emotion regulation. You're thinking, what are your patterns? Maybe I shouldn't have any hard conversations after 6 at night. That's me. I'm really no good afternoon. So knowing your
Me
patterns.
too, girl.
Yes.
I
Yes.
hit this wall about 7 p.m.
Mhm.
Hmm. And you did, because Ayla, you are having a child, right?
Yes.
And so you're going to be,
Oh, we're
this
gonna
is going
see.
to be very true for you, where you're like, yeah, so this is not a good time, right?
I know.
And it's
There's
okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's going to be a lot of conversations with my partner. I have a feeling there's going to be a
Yes.
lot we have to figure out.
Yes.
Luckily, we've had practice, but we'll see how this
Good.
goes.
Good.
Yes. And so also tracking your own patterns, your family dynamics awareness. So, um, where did you come from? What were the dynamics or what were the roles that you took in your family? Were you the mascot? Were you the joker? Were you the golden child? So knowing that you will probably have those same tendencies in your relationship, and old habits die hard. Um, so just starting to notice whether or when you start to caretake, or whether you're avoiding and why you're doing that, or when you're over explaining yourself. And so I don't know about you, but struggling with codependency, I remember when I first started working, I like didn't even remember to go to the bathroom. I was so engrossed in
No.
what I was doing. And so
Eating?
like
No.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
Like
All the
I
things.
I think my commute was something like it could be up to 3 hours, and it was not good for my health and it was affecting other areas of my life. And
But
I
you're
didn't
no
even realize
quitter,
it.
girl.
Right,
Right? You're
right.
no quitter.
And you get a lot of reinforcement from everyone. Oh, she can do anything.
Look
And,
at how much
you know,
she can handle. How can you do it all? That feels
right,
good to us.
right, right. it feels good until then you wake up one day and you're like, wait a minute, what
I
happened
just
here?
wasted 6 hours every day,
Yes,
every single
yes,
day, just trying to prove myself.
yes. And none of these things feel comfortable if you're struggling with codependency because you're so used to looking at what other people are doing and how can you fill the gaps. Um, so it's really like a leap of faith if you're trying these things. You might have gotten to the point where you're like, nothing else worked. I tried so hard and now I'm exhausted. Or you might be at the point where you're like, I just want to reach for something that feels a little bit better. Whatever space you're in, it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to take, yeah, way more discomfort or like weirdness than you think it will. And that's just good to prepare for.
Agree.
Um,
100% agree. It's very emotional. It takes a lot out of you. And so that's why I wonder if your next one is to take care of yourself.
yes. So, absolutely. Connecting to people outside the system.
Yes.
So focusing on you, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a friend, getting out, don't stay at home all the time and just ruminate about what's not going well and how to fix your relationship or how to fix your family. And this is part of building self-differentiation as well. It's like when somebody tells you you're working on a problem, go away from it, get a good night's sleep, take the weekend off because you're going to think about it differently once you come back to it.
What is self-differentiation,
So
would you say?
self-differentiation, that's a great question. It's a Bowen theory term. And what it means is having your own identity, your own
Yeah.
morals, ethics, values. And Bowen theory says like it's probably best, it's more differentiated if you have, several different identities, several different values, not just like I am, for example, a Christian person. So not just one thing, but because what happens when I don't know, something happens with that one thing. And then you feel like you still have to like glom onto it and cling to it because that's your identity and that's all you have. If it's a relationship, putting everything into a relationship, all that matters is my husband and my kids. That can be dangerous because what happens when things don't go well? What happens when something happens? You need to have other resources to go to. And that's not just for me, but that's for the good of my family, that there can be some flexibility there. Maybe I can help get them out of a storm because there are other resources that I can draw on. So it makes the world a lot more anxious and a lot smaller the less differentiated you are. So Bowen's had this theory, or this way to think about it. Differentiation can go self-differentiation on a scale of I can say I'm a 0 or I can say I'm 100. Nobody is
Okay.
100. Nobody's like totally differentiated, and hopefully you're not a 0, but we're probably somewhere, most humans are probably in the 20s or 30s of
Yeah.
differentiation.
Yeah. I think
So,
how I identified with that is I felt like I'd lost myself
mhm,
in
gosh, yes.
my situation and relationship.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
can see that that I had to work on. I lost myself. I think that's this differentiation that you're referring to. And I like that term.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, you want to just, you want to be mindful of it throughout your life, and you can have different levels of differentiation in different relationships. Maybe I tend to people please more with my mom, but I don't do it as much with my partner. So
Right.
recognizing the patterns in yourselves. And then
Love that.
the one other thing I'll say is because we're trying to manage anxiety in the system, if we are less differentiated, we tend to do something called triangulation.
Okay. You
So,
mentioned that earlier. So
yes.
remind us, tell us.
So, triangulation is when there's so much tension, we pull in a third party. So, this could
Oh.
mean I grab a drink and that makes me feel
Oh,
better.
okay.
And it could
That
also mean,
resonates.
yep, yeah, it could mean that. And, we
Okay.
release some of the tension, but we are probably not doing the thing that would be the more differentiated thing, which would mean having a conversation with our loved one about why we want to drink. What's making us want to drink? We're overwhelmed, and that's why we drink.
Mm.
It's, sometimes it's a way to relieve the tension. There's no judgment. But it's not going to be, it's like a short-term comfort and it's not fixing the problem.
Oh, that's so interesting. I want you to give
Yeah.
me another example of triangulation, but it's
Yes.
very interesting because I just did a show with someone where we were talking about the drinking every night,
Hmm.
having the wine every night as a coping mechanism. I 100%. Is that, would you say I triangulated
Yeah,
with wine?
that
Yeah.
sounds like it makes sense. Yeah, yeah,
I got
absolutely.
you, girl. Can you give me
And
one more example of that third party that you would bring in?
so it could be a person. So
Okay.
one of mine that mine always was I would bring in a friend. I would say, I'm going to talk to this friend about what's going on. And then I would go home and I wouldn't talk to my partner because I would have let the steam out of the pot. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with venting. This was when I was first
Right.
learning Bowen theory. But venting is different than triangulating someone because if I vent, that means that I'm going to go back to my partner and have the conversation. And maybe I talk to my friend to get to like clarify my own thoughts, kind of like writing in a journal. But if I go to them to let out anxiety and I don't actually address the problem and address the person that I need to, then I'm triangulating them.
Okay.
And
I
oftentimes
did that too, I
yeah,
think.
yeah.
I think that so my little tidbit on that is it's hard when there's a secret that you feel like isn't yours to share.
Mm,
And so I triangulated because in a way because I didn't tell my partner that I needed someone else, I needed my friends, and it
mhm.
created a problem. Whereas my suggestion would be, and I don't know, you can tell me this may not be the case, but I needed to talk to my partner about who and what I shared
Yes. You,
because
yeah.
otherwise it was like I was lying and or hiding that, and then he'd find out that some people knew things, and it created a really terrible dynamic that I try and teach my clients. Like, definitely have that safe place that you can go to that's okay with your partner.
That is such a good point. Yeah, I think so there is, like I said, being an adult child of an alcoholic, there's a lot of triangulation that goes on in my family, and it's
Yes.
totally understandable because there's a lot of stress and anxiety and not being sure how to deal with things. But every time the third person who was left out finds out about it, it undermines trust and safety.
Yes.
And so
Hugely.
I've had to say in a lot of cases, I really want to be there for you, but I can't have this conversation with you. This is my boundary. I can't be a part of this conversation because if this person were to find out about it, it would really hurt their feelings and upset them. And so I'm going to have to bow out. I hope you understand. And then remove myself from the situation if somebody can, I, if they regulate their emotions to respect that boundary, because boundaries are about what I do, not about what I expect from other people, that's not the outcome, fixing or changing other people. What I need to do if somebody doesn't respect my boundary is I need to kind of like keep myself safe,
I
beat my
100%
own
did
feet.
that.
Yeah.
Where, well, if family and friends mean well. They want
Mhm.
to know how things are going because
Yeah,
they want the best for you and your partner. But
they're
if it's
anxious.
going
Yeah.
to hurt your relationship, then it's okay to not share what's
Yeah.
going on in a safe way.
Absolutely. And it might be something that takes more, brainstorming with your partner.
Yes.
I need to be able to share with somebody, how am I
What
going to
can
do
I
this?
share? What would you feel
Yeah,
comfortable? Right?
absolutely.
It made a
Absolutely.
huge difference in my relationship. It built so much trust. When you can have that conversation with your partner, that's a real safety
Absolutely.
bonus.
Amazing. And the last one is just the same. As I said before, expect discomfort and keep going anyway, because self-differentiation, when you're struggling with codependency, or fusion, whatever you want to call it, um, it just feels unfamiliar at first. It feels uncomfortable. It feels wrong because the chaos is what feels familiar and the control. And it's terrifying not knowing what's on the other side or feeling like, it might feel like you're giving up. I know some people use the word detachment, and I always hated that word because I was like, I don't want to detach. I don't want to leave
Yeah.
them, and we can have like even survivor's guilt of like, I'm not doing the same part for my family that I used to do, and what's going to happen on the other side. So it's a leap of faith to see what happens. And so, like you said, those small changes of, maybe if your parent wants you to call them every night, and maybe you say, I love you. I know that you wanted me to call you every night, but I'm not able to do that right now. So I'm going to have to call you, every other night, and I hope you can understand. And then sticking to that. And, they have to deal with those uncomfortable feelings, whatever reason they wanted you to call them every night. But, you know, by remaining in that dynamic, you're not helping them any by overextending yourself. And they're going to feel shame.
One thing that helped me with those conversations would to always reassure them, like, we're not breaking up. We're working on it really, really hard. So I just want you to know that. And when we're not there, that isn't because we don't love you.
Great.
It really
Absolutely.
helped when I had those conversations, so that I could, because a lot of times your family member is worried, really worried, right? About what's happening behind closed doors, or that you're getting a divorce and breaking up. And that may be the case. But if it's not, and you're saying we're working on it really, really hard, we have our ups and downs, but I can't talk to you about it every single day. It seems to
Mhm.
help the situation and reassure everybody.
I love that. Yeah. Just the openness, and what will make the difference is like consistency over time.
Yep.
And so if you have a boundary and, somebody is like on you the whole week to get you to change your mind, when you waffle back and forth, that's not really helping anyone, you
No,
know.
no, it creates more expectation that your boundary isn't it can be broken, right?
Right.
Can be stepped over.
So
Yeah.
maybe starting small is better because it's more
Mhm.
manageable for you to follow through.
Yeah. Man, that was jam packed. Okay, so can we just like name bullet point
Mhm.
them again, so we can
Absolutely.
kind of, for people to glom onto and maybe write down?
Yep. So pause before reacting.
Yep.
Say what's true.
Yes.
Track your own patterns.
Yep.
Connect to people outside the system, and then expect discomfort and keep going anyway.
Oh, nailed it. Nailed it.
Mm.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. I know that this is going to really change some people's lives. I feel like the tools that you just gave are very practical, and you people could implement it today, and it's a very nice stepwise approach to making those changes that will make a huge difference. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for what you do.
Thank you so much. Likewise, thank you for what you do. I've learned so much from you as well.
Oh, thank you.
All right, let's break down the real deal. My top 3 takeaways from this raw, honest, and healing conversation with Ayla Fleming. Number 1, I want you to take away that just because it feels familiar doesn't mean it's healthy. So if you grew up in a home that was shaped by addiction, anxiety, emotional chaos, your nervous system learned to survive, not to thrive. And as adults, we unconsciously recreate those same dynamics because they feel manageable, even when they're hurting us. But familiar doesn't mean safe. And the first step is simply noticing when that old blueprint is running the show. Number 2, your calm is more powerful than your control, but only if it's actually calm. This one hit really deep with me because let's be honest, so many of us default to our survival mode in the moment. We need connection most. So maybe you like to avoid things and you say you need space, but you never come back to the conversation. Or maybe you're more anxious and you push for a resolution right now, even when the other person isn't regulated enough for it to be productive. I've done both, and the truth is, neither one brings the peace that we're craving. And Ayla's reminder that we have to pause, regulate, and give each other room before we try to repair is one of the most powerful shifts that we can make. And number 3, boundaries aren't rejection, they're protection. When you've spent your life managing other people's emotions, saying, "This isn't working for me," can feel mean or cold, but it's not. Boundaries don't break connection. They create the conditions where real connection is actually possible. So saying what's true with clarity and kindness is one of the most loving things we can do for them and for ourselves. And here's the biggest truth that Ayla and I both learned the hard way. Healing your relationship doesn't start with changing your partner. It starts with healing how you were wired to survive. Those old patterns, the people pleasing, the fixing, the avoiding, they keep us afloat, but they also keep us from feeling safe, seen, and supported. So if you've been carrying the emotional weight for your whole relationship, if you feel like you've lost yourself trying to hold it all together, please know you're not alone, you're not too much, and you're not stuck. If this show resonated with you and you were thinking about somebody who could really learn from what we talked about today, please share this show with others. And I can't wait to hear and in the comments how all of you felt about this and what changes you're committing to making today. All right, everyone, that is a wrap, and I will see you next week.
All right, that's a wrap for today on Love and Trauma, the real deal. Big thanks to my guests for sharing their insights. Couldn't have done it without you. Now, for those of you looking to take this journey further, I've got something special. Head to my website to grab Real Tactics, Real Healing, a survivor's playbook for navigating a relationship with a trauma survivor. It's packed with everything you need to know, do, and say to navigate the emotional minefield, find your balance, and regain your self-worth and happiness.